Happy New Year, and welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 85, A Bard's Lament. And man oh man, this episode is a doozy. I've been simultaneously looking forward to this episode and dreading this episode for a long time now, because this is one of the most important episodes in the entirety of Critical Role. Retroactively, it's the beginning of a new story arc. We didn't know that at the time. It's not quite as dramatic as something like episode 39 when the Chroma Conclave attacks, where it was a really stark beginning to a new story arc. And at the end of this video, we'll talk more about how this actually does really nicely set up the next story arc, but that's not why this episode is famous. But don't worry, we'll get there. So this episode picks up right where we left off, Grog versus Earthbreaker Groon, and at the top of the fight, Groon does not attack, and Grog takes his lead. He's trying to meet Groon on his terms. Clearly there's some sort of lesson here that he's meant to learn. But after a few rounds, he starts attacking Groon. But in order to hit him, he has to succeed on a wisdom saving throw, because Groon used his monk feature, Tranquility, to basically put himself under the effects of the Sanctuary spell. Grog keeps swinging and missing, because the DC is 20 and Grog gets a -2 to all of his saves thanks to the Deck of Many Things, so he would literally need to get a natural 20 to succeed. So eventually Grog just steps forward and touches Groon with one finger. Groon responds, and with gentleness comes clarity. This was the first test of this encounter, the first lesson Groon wanted to impart. And now he drops Tranquility, and the fight begins. Obviously, we're not going to go blow by blow, but there are lots of blows thanks to Groon's fury of blows. He blows the hell out of Grog, but Grog gets some of his own blows in as well, but he's not nearly as good at landing these blows as Groon is. We also see that Groon has legendary actions, which means he can add an extra attack after each one of Grog's turns. Since there are only two combatants, he can spend a legendary action after every turn, one assumes. This could add up really fast, but it doesn't seem like Matt has designed it so that he can do that after every single Grog turn. He only uses 3 legendary actions across the entire fight. It's a very interesting and kind of weird move from Matt, but I think I understand why he did it. The goal behind the design of legendary resistance within the game itself is to give a bad guy more things to do so their action economy can at least hope to rival a full party of players. You don't really need them in a one-on-one combat because your players are never going to get more attacks than you are, especially when your monster is a 20th level monk. You've got a lot of attacks already. So this doesn't seem to have been done for the same reason you would normally introduce legendary actions in most circumstances, which is fine. It just means that Matt must have had some other motive here. Now this is also a strange move because Matt has very deliberately given Groon a full character sheet, the same thing he would have if he was a player character, and obviously having legendary actions doesn't really jive with that design either. And again, that's also fine. Just because the base of your design is built off of using a character sheet doesn't mean you can't introduce any other monster statistics or rules. I mean, that would drive me insane, because if I had a NPC in my game that had a 20th level character sheet, I would basically go in with the goal of designing this fight around seeing how a 16th level barbarian can hold his own against the 20th level monk, like actually seeing how it would play out rules as written, so giving him legendary actions doesn't really line up with that concept. But Matt Mercer does not need to cater to my weird, probably neurodiverse ideas of what makes something consistent or not. But once again, that still means that this was a very conscious decision, to break from the player character sheet and give him a slightly different design, an aspect of monster design. So why do that? How does it serve the story? Well, it literally means Groon is so powerful no player character can ever reach his level of power. It is actually impossible. It helps to solve the world-building problem that is always going to come up anytime you're running a game of D&D ever. How can you introduce important NPCs who are actually meant to be the most powerful members of their respective class in the entire world? How can you do that when eventually the player characters will level up and hit that level themselves, and then those NPCs will just not seem as impressive anymore? How can your 20th level monk still seem impressive when you know that one day your players will probably hit 20th level themselves, and probably not that long from now, in less than a calendar year, actually? So how can you reinforce this character's status as the unbelievable powerful, undisputed master of their field? Well, you could give them legendary actions. Not that many, not as many as an ancient dragon or one of the other terrible foes the players might face, but enough that it can make it clear that they are operating on another level, literally, but also not literally, because it's not a level the players will ever reach. They're literally, not literally, is this the right use of the term? Anyway, they're higher level than the players can attain themselves, because they have an ability that they didn't get through leveling up. I hope that made sense. I think it did. But this essentially gives these NPCs a mechanical way to reinforce their narrative status. Also, in fairness, Groon did originally appear in a fight that was against more than one character in his first combat in the campaign, and he used legendary resistances in that combat, I think at least one. So this is in line with the design that Matt had originally established, and it might just be a mechanical carryover from that fight. But I also think that he refined the design at least a little bit, so he could demonstrate the same goal, still establish this character as a legendary NPC, but now the mechanics are slightly refined for this specific combat. Or maybe Grog just never forced Groon to make a saving throw because that's just not how Grog's powers work, so we never saw any legendary resistances because he didn't need to spend them. Anyway, returning to the highlights, partway through the fight, Groon hits Grog with his quivering palm technique, but doesn't activate it right away. Then he hits him a few more times, then he stuns Grog. And then on his next turn, he closes his fist and Grog takes 10d10 necrotic damage from his quivering palm. Blood just sprays out of veins all over Grog's body. And that's only because he succeeded on the saving throw. If he failed, he would have dropped to 0 hit points immediately. Grog says that he's not afraid to go down. That's a real man right there. You should always go down. But Groon responds, "That's the first lesson. Let's see if your words can be put into practice." Grog wails on him, but Groon just focuses and heals a bunch of his wounds. Groon stuns Grog again and then just unloads a bunch of attacks into him. Grog retaliates with his reckless attacks, all with Great Weapon Master to do extra damage, but this gives Groon advantage on his next round of attacks, so he unloads another flurry of blows. He has 4 attacks, and his third knocks Grog unconscious, and Grog uses Relentless Rage to get back up at 1 hit point. But the 4th hit knocks him out again, and he uses Relentless Rage to withstand it again, now at a DC 15, but he makes the save and he is back up with 1 hit point. Grog makes 3 attacks, all of his own, all reckless, all Great Weapon Master, 1 hit, 1 miss, 1 hit. And then he gets the "how do you want to do this" on the final strike. So even though Grog has only 1 hit point, he delivers the final blow and finishes Groon off. Good work, Grog. Always finish someone off. Then thunder roars. A bolt of lightning comes down from the open sky into the temple and hits Groon, and he wakes up and he says that Cord smiles upon Grog. And then to help illustrate that point, 2 bolts of lightning come down from the sky and zap Grog's gauntlets, and now they are exalted. Groon asks Grog, "What have you learned?" Grog answers, "Without the love of my friends, life has no meaning, and I would be nothing." That's less about what he learned in this specific fight, and more just like, what has he learned since the last fight? Groon asks, "How will you use this knowledge?" And Grog answers, "I will make their strength mine, and my strength their own, and in turn, I will try to make the world a better place than I found it." Travis gets a new magic item card. His strength is now 26, and when he enlarges, he gains resistance to fire, cold, and lightning for 10 minutes. Exciting stuff, especially because Grog was really trying to level up his vestiges. That's why he smashed up the mansion in episode 72. But of course he would need to vanquish someone in single combat to elevate his gauntlets. That makes perfect sense. It's kind of how he got them. Well, it's almost how he got them. It's how he tried to get them in the first place. And so it naturally makes sense that Grog, who is always looking for a fighting pit or some excuse to have a one-on-one brawl, would need to get a chance to do one of those in order for his gauntlets to level up. The party talks about getting drinks to celebrate, but it wouldn't be right without Scanlan. Grog also kind of wants to get his freak on with some ladies of the evening, and the players consider taking this opportunity to do a little bit of shopping, since they did teleport all the way here, and they don't know when Scanlan is going to wake up. And obviously the joke here is that Scanlan is going to wake up whenever they come back to Whitestone, and they all know that. This is a moment where they're not just, like, trying not to metagame, they're also just teasing Sam a little bit. But, on the other hand, they are a little bit trying not to metagame because they're trying to figure out what makes sense for their characters to do in this moment. They did travel all the way here, so is there something they could do really quickly that would help to justify this trip? I mean, I would think that burying the box of ashes and getting one of your vestiges literally exalted would be more than enough. But in fairness, they do decide to go buy potions because they keep trying to ask for potions in Whitestone every day and a half when they get back there, and people of Whitestone keep saying, "No, we don't have potions." So now they're in Vasselheim, at least they can buy some potions. They find a very fancy shop that looks brand new, and when they go inside, they find that the clerk is the same potion vendor that Grog overpaid that one time, and that Vex, and really all the party members, intimidated and bullied back in episode 44. I like the implication that this is a new shop because he got such a great deal selling potions to Grog that now he has been able to open a shop rather than operating out of his cart or a tent. It's a nice way to show the passage of time. It's a nice way to develop his character, and it's also a nice contrast from Victor, the black powder merchant. We usually see his shop degrading every time the players visit him, so now we're seeing that this vendor's life has actually improved over time. But this vendor does not want to deal with Vex, and she says that she was nice to him and everyone else bullied him. That's not quite how I remember it. This vendor doesn't have that many potions to sell right now anyway, and he doesn't even want to sell anything to the party, but Grog is determined. Eventually, they reluctantly pay 1,500 gold for some healing potions. Okay, Grog doesn't do it reluctantly. Vax doesn't do it reluctantly. Really, the only reluctant person is Vex. She just doesn't want to buy potions from this guy because she thinks he's mean. Which, again, is not how I remember it. But I don't think she's lying. I think she was genuinely so, for lack of a better term, traumatized by the fact that Grog did such a bad job negotiating with his first interaction with this guy and lost so much of their money in the same episode where she found out that they lost the flying carpet. She's always going to associate this guy with being a villain, which he really wasn't. Yes, obviously he took advantage of Grog, but that wasn't really on him. That was fully Grog. That was Travis's choice. But also, it's fine. This is hardly the first time a D&D player has irrationally disliked an NPC. Share some of your favorites in the comments below. Mine is when I was running Tyranny of Dragons, and I introduced Leosin, who's the monk who's supposed to recruit the players and send them on a mission, and my party hated him, and I have no idea to this day why. If you have a similar story like that, leave it in the comments below. I don't really know why I'm fishing for comments. This video is going to get a lot of them anyway, but I'm just actually genuinely curious about that topic. I want to know if you have NPCs who you introduced not expecting the players to dislike them and the players despised them, because that just is so entertaining to me. Anyway, the party buys some potions, and we finally learn this guy's name, Cedric Gilman. Of course, he's such a Gilman, I guess. He also shares this shop with a partner whose name we don't learn, but this partner is the one who deals with other kinds of potions besides healing potions. But he's currently out on a shipment right now. Cedric doesn't know when he'll be back, but he'll be back in a couple of days. Now, this doesn't ultimately go anywhere. The party never meets this partner, but this is a great move from Matt. He's basically saying, yes, you probably could buy other kinds of potions here. You can come back another time and buy more. But we're only doing healing potions today, so buy your potions and then go back to Whitestone and hang out with Sam's character. Obviously, if you're familiar with this episode, you know why Matt wants to get the party back in a room with Scanlan. But honestly, I'm always a fan of Matt doing this, cutting down on the options in front of the players when they really should focus on reuniting with a player character who missed the last session, or is just joining for this one game, like a guest star. I'm obviously not talking about when the party chooses to split up. If that's the case, you still want to make sure everyone has a chance to participate, but you can just cut away to different groups throughout the session if they willingly split the party. You don't have to force them back together right away. But in this case, the only reason Scanlan isn't with the rest of the party is because Sam and his family were on vacation in the last episode. He was celebrating his wife's birthday. And so I think it's really smart to try to bring these characters back together as quickly as possible. And that does mean limiting an option. You're not going to sit here and look at a list of different potions available. You can buy healing potions, and that's it. In fact, I actually wish Matt would do this a lot more with Pike, because whenever he has to get the gang back together and introduce a player into the session for the first time, I'm very happy when he takes steps to make that happen as quickly as possible. That's what I think he should do in those situations, and that is especially true in this episode. It's always a good idea in general, but in this specific episode, it's kind of really important that Matt gets everyone back together as soon as possible, because there is still a lot of ground left to cover. Keyleth asks if Vax has to visit the Temple of the Raven Queen while they're here, but he says they should come back to the city when they have some more downtime. He also wants to visit the Velvet Cabaret for a date night. But I think he wants to put these off specifically, well, first of all, so they can team back up with Sam, but also, he's stalling his next meeting with the Raven Queen, because unlike his mindset back in episode 39, when he had his outburst about how they don't have a quest in front of them right now, currently, Vax doesn't want to go on an epic quest right now. He wants to enjoy retirement for a while. He wants the party to be able to live their lives as much as they can before the Raven Queen comes with the next quest. The difference here, the reason his character is so different here than he was back in episode 39 is because now he actually does know there's another epic quest coming for them. The Raven Queen made that very clear, which means Matt basically made it very clear that soon, but not right away, there's going to be another major quest like the Chroma Conclave storyline. And so I actually think maybe Liam even thinks there's a time jump coming. I could be wrong about that, but he is talking a lot about all these downtime things he wants to do, and I don't think he's assuming they're going to handle all of those during downtime sessions. I think he understands that there would be a time jump for some of this. But before that happens, he knows they still have to get some important work done. But he's talking about all these things he wants to do once things have settled down, because he's planning ahead for an extended period of downtime, which he assumes would be handled with a time jump. Also, minor spoilers here, there is a time jump coming, not right away, but soon, later in this arc. And during that time jump, as they're figuring out what they're doing and they're handling all that stuff away from the table, Liam's going to run a one-shot for the group. And I wonder if he already knew that by now. If he already knew that there's a time jump coming and he needs to prep a one-shot for when that happens, whenever they get to it. And if that's the case, then yeah, he may actually know they're doing a time jump. Or he may be petitioning for it. He may be saying, hey, Matt, I'm happy to run a one-shot for us to make it happen, but I'd like to do a time jump at some point so we can handle some of the retirement stuff that my character would want to do. Anyway, back to this session. They get back to Whitestone, and Grog asks Percy about any brothels in town because he still wants to get his freak on. I think both these players have forgotten that Grog already asked Percy about this. That was the scene where Percy said, "Your secret is safe with my indifference." Fair enough, I think Percy literally wasn't really paying attention during that scene, but both of them have kind of forgotten they already talked about this. But this is interesting because I think the reason Grog is asking is because the players perceive this as a downtime episode. They don't have a big quest in front of them. They already had their big fight of the session. In their minds, they're probably just going to go for a drink with Scanlan and celebrate Grog's victory, and then maybe Grog will try to get some action of a different sort. Percy rolls to see if he knows where there's a brothel in town, and he rolls a natural 20. And so Matt tells him that no, you haven't been there yourself. That's not what the natural 20 means in this case, but your older brother went there once, so you know roughly where in town it was. However, Percy responds to Grog by messing with him a little bit and saying, "No, I don't know where any brothels are. Sorry." They arrive in Scanlan's room and find Kaylee sleeping at his side. Grog kicks out the chair from under her to wake her up. She vows revenge, but it's playful. It feels like maybe Grog just started a prank war with someone who's going to take it way, way more seriously than he was expecting. But that could be a fun dynamic still. And then Scanlan wakes up. The other characters tell him that there was this big orgy after he killed the dragon. He proposed to some woman downstairs, but he immediately knows they're messing with him. Then he sees Kaylee, and he's pretty surprised to see her. He asks her to give him a moment with the rest of the party. After she leaves, he apologizes to the group for dying. And then he asks them a question.
Who got Kaylee? Who brought Kaylee here?
Vex did.
Down on the bed with you. Well, it just seemed like the logical thing to do, dear.
Why the fuck would you do that?
Right.
This is obviously not the reaction they were expecting. And this kicks off a very, very important scene. The full time codes are on screen. I'll do my best to summarize it and show some highlights because I can't just play a whole collection of clips from this scene. It's long and it's great, but I legally can't just show you 20 minutes of Critical Role here on YouTube. So I'll describe it for you and show you what I can get away with and what will actually help support my arguments. Unfortunately, I'm sure that means I'm going to miss some people's favorite lines or quotes because this whole scene is incredible and it's really hard to narrow it down to only the most important moments. How do you decide which clips you should summarize and which ones you think your audience really has to see so you can make your points? Well, let's start with this exact moment, the moment everything turns. Scanlan turns on a dime. There's no ramp up, there's no preamble, he just dives right in. He is very angry because he made a promise to his daughter that he would not die, and they brought her to his dead body and confirmed that he broke his promise, which in his mind also confirms every worst thing she thought about him, that he's too weak to care for her and he doesn't keep his word. Vex points out that Kaylee never thought anything of Scanlan when they first met, but now she came here and she saw that Scanlan was willing to give his life for a greater cause. Isn't that more important? And she stayed with him after he came back to life. That seems to indicate that she does have a lot more care for Scanlan than she ever did before. She helped with the ritual. And this is where we learn that Scanlan did hear Kaylee's music, and he did hear Pike's poem, and he did not hear Grog's song. Because according to Matt, this was his decision, if a portion of the ritual was not successful, then you didn't hear it from beyond the veil. Grog is obviously a little bit stunned to hear that his contribution was not heard. He doesn't say anything, but you can tell from his face that he feels upset by this, but not in a way where he blames Scanlan. It looks more like he feels like he just let him down. Like he was judged and found not worthy. Meanwhile, Vex is a little bit surprised at this revelation that the dead can hear the things that are said during the ritual because Percy denied hearing anything the party said over his own dead body. He said that he only felt the moment that Keyleth severed his connection with Orthax before the ritual itself took place, but he claimed he never heard anything of the ritual itself. And so when Vex realizes that that's not true, you can see Percy wince at this revelation, because he was lying to her. He made her believe that he did not hear her confession of love, and now she knows that that was not true. But even though the other players insist that Kaylee did see that Scanlan gave his life in pursuit of a noble cause, Scanlan still believes that she will just see weakness, that he died, that he can't protect her, that his friends thought it would be funny to fuck with him when he was unconscious, after he had just died. And this is when the scene shifts again. Because for everything we've seen so far, he's had a perspective that the other players don't see, that they can't understand, that they feel he is wrong about, that they feel his fears about how she perceives him will be mitigated by what they saw as a noble act, and neither side can see the other's perspective. Scanlan cannot imagine that his daughter can look past what he perceives as a moment of weakness. The other players cannot imagine that she would judge him so harshly. They're just not in alignment here. But now the scene shifts, because Scanlan is about to start being knowingly cruel. Because as it turns out, he's been sitting on some resentment for a while.
And I wish you hadn't meddled in my affairs. I don't have I don't have many things that I care about. And I don't have anything that cares about me.
That's a lie.
That is bullshit.
It's definitely
Full
untrue.
bullshit.
What? You think you care about me?
Yeah.
Yes, asshole, yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're right. You like me because I make jokes and I play songs and I give you a warm place to stay at night and I feed you fucking chicken and I heal you in battle. But you don't really care about me. Come on. Let's be honest with each other. You don't really give a shit about me,
I've
do you?
changed my outlook on life because of you. What the fuck are you talking about? Of course we all love you. You could crush me
Prove it.
in a second.
Prove it.
What do you
How?
want us to do?
We traveled into the fucking 9 hells to get Pike a suit of armor. We went and battled a city of vampires so Percy could feel good about his name. We fought Goliaths for Grog. We've traveled across planes of existence so you could fix your fucking daddy issues. But you've never done anything for me. Ever. You've never risked anything. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. What's my mother's name? What's her name? Easy question. Died in front of me. Killed by a goblin. Biggest part of my life. What's her name? My father. Is he alive or dead? How old am I? Where's my fucking dog? You
We
don't
did get
care
your
about
dog.
me.
We did get your dog.
Did you?
No, we didn't.
No, we did. I searched.
I've asked you your age.
I thought I did the magic search.
Nope.
Fucking hell.
Here, Scanlan is essentially expressing resentment that everyone else perceives him as a plucky little shithead who's just a performer and a jokester. He's saying that because that's all they know of Maz, they've never thought to dig deeper. They've never tried to figure out who he was. Everyone else is dominated by their dark backstories that propel them to go on these epic quests, but he's essentially arguing that he has one too, and nobody ever cared enough about him to ask about it. Like, they knew what had happened to him. They knew he didn't like goblins, and they probably knew why, but nobody ever gave him a consideration to ask a single follow-up question. Now, in a minute, we'll talk about how this is motivated by what Scanlan is going through and the parts of this that are kind of being rewritten to serve his agenda in the scene. But first, I actually want to pull back and see what this means for the players themselves. See, at first I was going to talk about the fact that we assume a lot of players in our D&D games know each other's backstory because we announce them at the table, but I don't really know if that's actually true. I think we do want our stories to be revealed in important ways, and while I do think it's perfectly reasonable for our characters to have conversations that we don't role play out, especially where we talk about the spells we have access to, the abilities we have. Like, I don't think it's metagaming to revive the sorcerer first, because even though she's never cast Revivify before, you still know that she has it, because we can assume she's discussed the fact that she thinks she could bring someone back to the dead now, thanks to her celestial heritage. She just hasn't had a chance to try it yet. And so when you're in that dire moment of figuring out who to resurrect, you're like, if I bring her back, she can bring someone else back, and perfect. That is a reasonable element of metagaming, I feel. Maybe other people disagree. Let me know in the comments below. But I think backstories are something that we kind of do assume that the other characters don't know about unless they are described within the context of the game itself. Clearly that's how the party feels as well, because they didn't know Percy's backstory until episode 24, even though they'd been adventuring together for years at that point. And again, the other players knew his backstory. I'm not talking about stuff that you're hiding from your real-world friends. But I think a lot of us hold on to our backstories until somebody asks, because it makes more sense than just word vomiting our backstory whenever we meet someone new. So I think Sam is absolutely right to assume that because they didn't roleplay asking him about his backstory, that means they never did so. However, in a weird way, this whole interaction is a symptom of the fact that Scanlan was designed very differently from the other player characters, because his backstory doesn't have any plot hooks in it. There's a lot more going on than that, and we'll get to it, but let's talk about this first. He lists off all the quests they've gone on, the way they've made time for every other character except for him. And this is sort of an indictment of the design of this campaign. Every character has gotten some sort of customized personal arc, except for Scanlan. His big personal arc happened in the background of everybody else's. He got 3 episodes after the Briarwood arc to be introduced to Kaylee, and then she left town, and then the city was attacked by dragons, and now they had this big, epic, still personal quest dealing with the twins' dead mother and the destruction of all of civilization, and Kaylee would have to wait. The next time they ran into her was in the middle of the Western storyline, which is all about Grog facing his own epic personal demons. Kaylee escaped into the sewer before the fight with Kevdak, they went looking for her before the dragon fight, and they didn't find her, and they couldn't spend any more time on it than that, because they had to focus on all these upcoming dragon fights. All of Scanlan's character progression happened in the background during other storylines. His big personal arc was a subplot. The same goes for Scanlan's drug storyline. We might try to argue that it was prompted by a friend asking him to go get some spice and the players misinterpreting that as a drug, but honestly, his desire to become a full-on drug addict was completely self-motivated. Sam just decided that his character wanted a drug habit, and it only played out in the background of this grand epic adventure everyone else was having, as they were hunting down Percy's personal enemy Ripley, and then they were making deals with Raishan, who had helped commit a genocide on keyless people. Those two characters are dealing with intense enemies, and also we're still dealing with the murderer of the twins' mother. And Sam's just deciding that now is the time for Scanlan to fall victim to his own personal demons, because he doesn't have a story hook like everyone else does. Even with the vestiges, Scanlan's vestige was not recovered after some big dramatic arc. They went to the Sphinx because they needed information about the other vestiges, and the Sphinx said, "Oh, by the way, here's a sword for your bard." It was an afterthought. They didn't even know they were going to get one there. And it was a weapon that Scanlan didn't ever really use, either. And yeah, I'm sure it made sense to Matt to give Scanlan a sword. Scanlan did cut the head off a king of the Duragar back in the Underdark, so he's used a sword before. But it's pretty unarguable that Scanlan has not received the same treatment within the story as the rest of the player characters have. Of course, that doesn't change the fact that in this moment, Scanlan's being a little bit malicious. Sam himself has talked about this after the fact, but he's admitted that Scanlan knows they didn't just go to Whitestone to make Percy feel good about his name, they went to save lives, and to clear their own names so they could keep their own status in Amon. Scanlan knows they did not go to the Feywild because of the twins' daddy issues, they went to get a magic weapon so they could kill the dragons that had terrorized their homeland. It is not the other player characters' faults that these important quests were also tied into their backstories. That was kind of a choice that Matt made, and he was also able to do all of that only because the other player characters had these rich backstories that it basically invited him to present them with D&D adventures that were tied into their own personal drama. Sam created a character who basically had no ties to the world outside of a traveling troupe he used to run with. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Players do that all the time. But when you do that, you do need to be prepared for the fact that having a thin backstory with no major enemies or important NPCs essentially means that you aren't going to get the full Briarwood treatment. I think this is the fundamental reason why so many players out there who want something more like the Critical Role experience don't really understand that it's not the job of the Dungeon Master to invent all that stuff whole cloth. It's a conversation where the Dungeon Master riffs off of what you give them. You can't have the Briarwood arc if you don't put the Fall of Whitestone in your backstory. You can't have the Kevdak conflict if you didn't invent a villain who has a cool magic item and is also intensely hateable. You don't get the Chroma Conclave without a dead mom killed by a dragon. Now, yes, Matt obviously went above and beyond when he turned those storylines into quests. I don't think anybody was expecting a cadre of evil dragons to work together and take over the continent just because a dragon killed the twins' mother. That is much more than they were expecting. But when they made their characters, they also knew they were basically asking Matt for an opportunity to fight that dragon at some point in the future. But Scanlan didn't have an epic quest baked into his backstory. He had a dead mom killed by goblins, one of the weakest creatures in the world, and he had a musical mentor. Matt had to invent more detail to enrich his story. He had to invent his estranged daughter to provide a consequence for the way Scanlan lives his life. He had to make the musician mentor into a member of a secret organization, and okay, fair enough, that never actually comes up during the campaign, but it's in the campaign guide, so it is something that Matt was planning, or at least had folded into this backstory. But kind of by the nature of who Scanlan is and how he was designed, all this stuff just wound up as the focus of various subplots, and never took center stage on its own. But I want to be extremely clear here. There's no sense that Sam is frustrated with Matt because Scanlan hasn't gotten a full story arc. Instead, Scanlan is bringing all this up as an example of the fact that his fellow party members just don't know him that well, and they are not as invested in him as he is in them, because he's already frustrated with them, so he's bringing this up to hurt them. I think everything we just talked about is really interesting. I think it's interesting that Sam's storyline was a subplot while everyone else got their own dedicated quest. But that's not actually what Scanlan is upset about, because the truth is, not every character's storyline in this campaign was created by Matt. Some of them were generated by the players themselves, and they also played out in the background of these other adventures as subplots. The Craven Edge storyline only happened because the party got a particularly good magic item and they gave it to Grog. And only then did Travis and Matt discover all of the comedic and dramatic potential of giving that weapon to that character, especially in the lead up to the Kevdak fight. Vax's journey with the Raven Queen only happened because Liam made a decent persuasion roll against the Goddess of Death after Laura happened to roll a natural 1 against a trap. These are also essentially subplots that finally took the stage and became larger stories right around the climax of these subplots. But part of the reason that happened is because the players made an effort to make sure their characters were pursuing their own goals. Scanlan didn't have as many of those as the other player characters did, but eventually, he started to pick up his own goals, reunite with his daughter, and start a drug problem. Sam decided this was going to be his arc. This was a player-directed subplot, and it ended with this. Additionally, Vax makes a really good point at the end of the clip we just saw. He says that he did ask how old Scanlan was, so it's pretty unfair for him to throw that back in their faces as proof that they don't care about him when he has asked more than once. Sam chose to play a character who didn't lean on anybody else and didn't confide in anybody else and didn't really tell them he was going through all this difficult stuff and always insisted he could take care of himself. Vex even points that out. She says that every time they've asked him if he's okay, he just laughs and jokes. And in response to her saying that, he defaults back to the same old move. He says he doesn't need them. He says he can take care of himself. This is exactly the same mindset, the same defense mechanism that they never pushed past. And now he's lashing out at them because they never did. And there's obviously an argument that they should have pushed past it anyway, but he is still the guy who pooped on beds and slept around and was a more comedic character, and now he's resentful that nobody thought to examine him as a more rich inner person. And as much as there's some truth to that, it's also not completely fair to imply that they never did ask about him, or ask if he's okay, ask what's going on with him, ask about his age. It's just not true. He also laments that everyone else in the party has someone but him. Grog has Pike, Vex has Percy, Vax has Keyleth, and he's alone. These obviously are not all romantic relationships. Grog and Pike is not a romantic relationship. But the closest connection Scanlan has with anybody else is with his best friend Grog, and with Pike as the object of his affection. But really his closest connection is with Kaylee. And much to his frustration, he hasn't gotten a lot of time with her. Because unlike the rest of the party, she's an NPC. But this is why he feels so strongly that he had a chance of a relationship with her, but the party screwed that up.
Scanlan, do you think any of us could have gotten here without each other? I thought you knew that more than the rest of us. Maybe we just thought you didn't need us as much as you felt like we didn't.
I thought you were the only one who had everything figured out.
I did too.
Well, then I must be a very good liar.
You are.
You are.
I've thought for months. What haven't I got figured out that Scanlan has got figured out? I've been trapped in the mud for months. Wondering what I could do to get where you are. Scanlan, you fucking saved the world with us. And if your daughter can't see that, then she can't see anything.
This is interesting because Keyleth and Vax are essentially trying to defend themselves. They are functionally saying, of course we didn't ask you how you were doing. We've been looking up to you. We've imagined that because you present yourself as so confident and so capable and so self-sufficient, none of us ever thought to ask if you were struggling. And this is the hard part about depression. There are people who can be enormously depressed, and from the outside, not only does it seem like everything's fine, but they might even seem to be the most capable person in the friend group. This is obviously a complicated topic that I don't really know enough about to dive into more detail than that, but the point is, it's just not always so obvious as we might hope it is to notice when someone is in pain. And here we see that two characters are having a very different reaction to this realization. Keyleth seems more apologetic. She understands that they made assumptions, and they were wrong. Vax, on the other hand, is struggling with understanding how this person who gave them all this wonderful advice that helped pull Vax out of his own depression tailspin could have been suffering this entire time. He cannot reconcile these two ideas. He can't come to terms with the fact that Scanlan was suffering in much the same way Vax was, and that Scanlan was able to offer him guidance that helped save Vax, but all the while he was in pain. Scanlan's response to this is that if Vax actually respected him, he wouldn't pick him up and put him down and drag him around and unbuckle his armor in front of him. He's very specifically reacting to the scene in Thordak's lair, but also just generally addressing the idea that Vax would pick up Scanlan and drag him around sometimes. And Vax responds that Scanlan's thrown some of them like baseballs. He doesn't see that as terribly different. But of course it is. Anytime Vax picks up Scanlan and drags him somewhere else, that is, technically, Liam taking control of the scene. And in some cases, like in the scene with Thordak's lair, he's doing that because he wants a private moment. He wants to do some role-playing with Sam. He wants to connect with him. But anytime he does that, it's very, very different from when Scanlan throws one of them in the middle of battle. Scanlan's point is that it is very infantilizing to be hauled around that way. It's patronizing. I'm not going to speak for Liam specifically because I think in the Thordak's lair scene, it was partially motivated by the anger that Vax felt about how reckless and stupid Scanlan was being with his drugs. Without even factoring in him picking up Scanlan, he was still addressing him, talking down to him, because he thought Scanlan had done something that he shouldn't have, something that could have gotten him killed, for no apparent reason. And I'm sure other scenes in the past have either been motivated by trying to get a moment alone, or by the idea that picking up Scanlan might be funny. Not all of them are meant to be patronizing in the same way. I'm not going to go through every time Liam's done this and decide which ones are valid and which ones are not, because that's just not the point. In fact, sometimes I think the fun of playing a smaller character is in embracing the fact that other characters can just pick you up and move you if they want to. As long as what they're doing is moving the scene forward in an interesting way, or just in a way that's funny enough that Sam doesn't mind, then those are completely fine.
Anyway, I may need a bed tonight. You see, freedom fighting is tiring work. So I was just wondering if maybe...
These people just survived the apocalypse, Scanlan. They don't need your gonorrhea.
But I actually do think this is something we should watch out for in our own games. I can say that in some groups I've played in, I have played with some players who do tend to pick up the smaller characters and drag them around, and it is patronizing. They may not mean it that way, but it is, because it is seizing control of the scene and saying, I'm going to use the fact that you're playing a small character to demand that we have this scene in this particular method in the way I want to. And you're not going to get the chance to do the thing you want to do, you're doing the thing that I want you to do. And again, I can't even insist that this is something that Sam himself is actually mad about in general. But it is something that he feels his character would be upset about in a scene where he's already upset with the other characters. And once again, Scanlan says that the rest of the party blew his chance at a real relationship with his daughter, but Vex cuts him off. The problem is that he's essentially taking away the agency from Kaylee. He's not treating her as a real person. He's treating her as a prize, something he feels he is or is not worthy of earning the respect of. But he's doing all this completely unilaterally, without the input of the person herself. Maybe he's right. Maybe she really did lose all respect for him when he died. Maybe the party is right, and this is the moment that is going to help him break through to her and help her realize that he is not the man she was worried he would be, that he is a good man, that he is a hero. There's only one person who can answer that question, and she's not even in the room. And this contribution from Vex changes everything.
Scanlan,
I had one shot with her, and now how will I ever show her that I can be trusted? How will I ever show her that I can protect her?
Well, maybe you should fucking talk to her.
Yeah, you think you are a better father than most of us have ever had.
You're right. I should talk to her.
You should.
I should.
Don't
And
treat
I
her like
will.
a fucking sacred object. Treat her like a daughter,
Fine.
Scanlan.
You're right. I will. I'll talk to her. Listen, I don't know what adventure we're going on next, but I think you should go without me.
Really?
Vex is right. I should talk to her. I should be here for her. I don't know why I wasn't with her in the first place. I didn't need to go with you to kill the dragons. I should have just been with her in the first place. I was probably just scared to. I should just be her father and stay.
Sam had decided already that his character was going to leave the group in this episode. He'd already talked to Matt about it. He'd already started working on his replacement character. This was the plan. Being separated from Kaylee, dying 2 fights in a row, dying when he'd made a promise to his daughter that he wouldn't die, developing his drug problem, everything was getting to be too much. And Sam just could not imagine a good reason why his character would stay in the group and keep going on D&D adventures. He could not imagine that he wouldn't just turn around and leave at this point. I just recently made a video about the SCAR system in Daggerheart, and in that system, your character can survive death by instead getting knocked unconscious in any fight. But eventually that takes its toll on your mind or your body, and it's just time for you to leave the party and retire. That's essentially what's happening here. But he was just going to leave by himself. It wasn't until Vex pointed out that he needs to talk to his daughter, that's when he realized that that's how his story should end. If Scanlan walks off alone without the rest of the party, it's a tragedy. If he leaves with Kaylee, it's still bittersweet, but at least there's some hope that he's going to find some peace and become the father that he wishes he was. This is the resolution he's landed on. He has made his decision. And this should be a really nice and sweet, if still bittersweet, moment, where he leaves the group, but you still know that he's ultimately going to be okay because he's going to go learn to be a father. Perhaps in a better world, this is where the scene ends, with hugs, goodbye, tears shed, but still smiles on their faces as they wish him well. But unfortunately, this whole conversation began with some really unkind words. Scanlan really ripped into his friends. Whether you feel it was justified or not, whether he was making any valid points or just lashing out to hurt them, that was a hard moment. And all the rest of the party has to process this, and they all have some very different reactions. Grog asks what Scanlan's mother's name was, and Scanlan says it was Juniper. And Grog just says he's sorry he didn't know that. He's not interested in keeping score, he's not interested in going through every argument Scanlan made and debunking each point. From his perspective, he hurt his friend, and so he's taking accountability for that by doing something that he knows his friend would appreciate. And Scanlan responds, "Thank you for asking." It's a very simple, small gesture, but is the perfect response, because it essentially validates Scanlan's feelings, and it starts to diffuse the tension. Vex begrudgingly asks the next question, is his father alive? Scanlan admits he doesn't actually know. His name was Viku, and he made things. I don't know if that means he was a carpenter or a cobbler or a toy maker. Grog and Keyleth admit they were being selfish by bringing Scanlan back with no regard for what he was going through personally. And of course, whatever he wants to do, stay or go, that is his decision. They're just glad Scanlan is alive. Again, Grog is doing fantastic work here. He understands that everything else Scanlan has brought up is just a distraction from the main point. Scanlan is upset that they brought his daughter here, and Grog says they weren't even thinking about that because they were thinking about how much he meant to them, and he apologizes for the fact that they were being selfish by only focusing on their own needs. He's getting to the heart of the argument and acknowledging that Scanlan's right. They didn't really consider the relationship Scanlan had with Kaylee, and they should have. Keyleth says he taught her a lot about how to look on the bright side of things. She says they need someone in their lives who makes jokes and performs and brings the mood up. He is not adding no value to them. What she's trying to do is make sure that he understands that even if they weren't always good at expressing it, they do value him. Again, she's focusing on the second core argument he was making, the idea that they don't care about him. She's not focused on disproving each point he made, she's focused on letting him know that he is appreciated. But she also doesn't deny that they probably did a bad job expressing it. She doesn't take that away from him. She doesn't go into that part of the argument at all. Again, she's also validating his feelings, but also trying to make it clear that they still do care about him. And while she's still talking about this in terms of what he does for them, she's framing it in the context of how they didn't make him feel appreciated for that. And it's not just for his magic, but also for the way he lifted their spirits. It's not perfect, but her heart is in the right place. She's still apologizing. However, Vax is still stewing on some things that Scanlan said during his outburst. He points out that they've never actually had a conversation about the fact that Thordak killed the twins' mom. They never talked about that because Vax didn't want to talk about it. They talked about Kaylee in the sewers beneath Western because that's something that Scanlan wanted to talk about. And outside of that scene, Vax was respecting Scanlan's privacy. As he pointed out, Scanlan has not been forthcoming. And Scanlan admits that that's fair. He really hasn't been. That's a pretty big admission coming from Scanlan. If his argument is, you don't care enough about me to ask any questions, having him admit that they did ask and he withheld the answers really does feel significant. Vax goes on to say that they have survived a hellscape. Before he can make whatever point he was about to make, Scanlan points out he didn't survive. He died twice in a row. He says he's being kept alive by some weird, fucked up magic. Okay, I know this is the moment that a lot of people, including Ashley Johnson, really wish Pike had been present for this scene. Yes, canonically Pike is in the room, but she has nothing to say because Matt is not going to jump in as her. That would be going too far. It should be up to Ashley to figure out how she would want to respond to this, and it is a real shame that she wasn't able to be there for this scene. However, I've seen a lot of people argue, and I'm sure it's already happened in the comments below, I've seen a lot of people argue that if she was there, Scanlan would not have left. I'm sorry, this is not true. Now, this argument has picked up a lot more steam after Season 3 of the TV show, which, minor spoilers, I don't usually talk about the changes that are made for the show, but I have to do it in this context. She's present for the equivalent of this scene, and his departure from the group is a lot more gracious on the show. But also, he didn't die on the show. And also, in the show, he confided in her about a lot of these same feelings, about his feelings of frustration of not getting to spend more time with Kaylee. He actually talked to her about that stuff throughout the season leading up to this moment. He wasn't bottling everything up in the same way. And to pull the curtain back a little bit more, the creators of the show have said that they were very open about the fact that they didn't want to end the season on such a down note like A Bard's Lament when they didn't know yet whether or not they'd get another season after that. If Season 3 had been the end of the show, then What's My Mother's Name is a rough final note to go out on. But even without that consideration, the context leading up to the scene in the show was very, very different. Because once again, in this episode, Sam had decided that his character was going to leave and nothing can change his mind about that. I just don't think Ashley would have been able to change that either. But I understand why people feel this way. Because I think most of the members of the party don't realize that Scanlan has already made up his mind, and that he came into this scene looking for a way to remove himself from the group. That's his goal. He's trying different tactics to achieve his ultimate objective, which is leaving the group. They think he's coming to this conclusion as they're talking, but that's not the case. Which essentially means they're having two different conversations. The group is trying to convince him not to do something, or to make their case for why he doesn't have to leave on these terms, but they don't realize he's already left the group. He just hasn't left the room yet. And when you realize that, you start to see that he's just taking a bunch of different tactics to try to get out of the scene while still achieving his ultimate goal, leaving the group. That's why his next argument is to claim that he's out of his league. They've left him behind in power. He hasn't done anything to help them in a lot of recent fights. And this definitely stems from another aspect of the last couple of sessions that would definitely contribute to the reason Sam might have felt it made sense for his character to move on. Because for the last couple of fights, Sam has barely gotten to cast any spells. He spent most of the time unconscious or dead. You can see how that would be another contributing factor to him eventually feeling too overwhelmed to keep adventuring as Scanlan. But once again, in this scene, it's just an excuse. It's a justification for what he already wants to do. And Vax calls him out on that.
I'm out of my league. Listen, it was fun. It's fun. It really has been fun to travel with 6 legends. It's fun. It's fun to say that your friends are legendary fighters. It's fun.
Excuse me. Speaking as someone who has been fucking depressed for a long time, look me in the eye. I was shit for months. And you're one of the main reasons I am out of that now. We would be dead, all of us, if it weren't for you. The first time we fought Raishan, we would all be dead. You are in a pity party right now, and I know you're hurting, and I'm sorry you're hurting, and I love you. But you are lying to yourself that you've been of no use to us. You are lying to yourself. If you want to retire, if you want to go off with your daughter, that's fucking wonderful. I encourage you to do it, but don't lie to yourself.
Well, that's just it. I'm a really good liar.
I actually do agree with a lot of Vax's arguments in this episode. I think he's right that a lot of the points that Scanlan throws out there are just not true. But I also think these arguments between the two of them are what escalates this scene. Vax's pushback is what takes this from the rant of one very upset person and 5 other people trying to process it, and these responses turn it into an actual fight. I absolutely understand the logic behind most of Vax's arguments, and I even think that he is right more often than not during this whole scene. But I also think that sometimes being right is maybe not as important as being understanding. I think Vax is hoping that he'll be able to cut through the bullshit and Scanlan will realize, oh my gosh, you're right. I forgot about the counterspell against the prismatic spray. You're right, I'm being unfair. I guess I was just having a low moment and feeling bad for myself. But obviously with the benefit of hindsight, I can tell you that I don't think that was ever on the table. But I also think there is a problem with the fact that Vax and Keyleth are both approaching this from the perspective of how much Scanlan means to them. They're still trying to debunk the idea that they don't care about him. It really hurt them. It really hurt Vax to hear somebody you care about say that you don't care about them. 1000%, I get that. I have been there. I have actually been on both sides of the you don't care about me, we're not actually friends argument. It is not a fun conversation to have, no matter who you are. But the best response was Grog's. There's a scene in the Season 2 finale of Ted Lasso, and I'll try to spoil as little as possible because it's a really good show, you should go watch it, but there's a scene in the Season 2 finale where there's a very similar interaction. Somebody lashes out at Ted Lasso about a bunch of perceived slights and misunderstandings and all this bottled up resentment. And the person saying all these things to Ted, well, they're just factually wrong about a lot of things that they say, just like Scanlan is here. And that person lashes out with some low blows. They are trying to hurt Ted, just like Scanlan was trying to hurt Vox Machina. And yeah, the response from Ted is the same thing we saw from Grog in this scene. It's an apology. He doesn't try to set the record straight because he realizes that this is the wrong time to try to do that. But by just apologizing, by just letting this person be upset and honoring that feeling, he's leaving the door open for a future reconciliation on another day. And he's also just taking accountability for the fact that even though a lot of these arguments are factually wrong, it doesn't change the fact that this is still how he made his friend feel. And that makes him feel bad. He does still feel guilty about that, about whatever role he had to play in that. You might argue that that's not fair. You might argue that it's not that different from just being a pushover. And yeah, sometimes it is important to stand up for yourself and set the record straight. But ultimately, maybe it's just a lot healthier to honor someone's feelings that way. But that is easier said than done. Like I said, as much as I wish I'd been the Grog the last time something like this happened to me, I've been the Vax a lot more often. Because it fucking hurts to be told that you have, at best, been failing to properly express your care for someone, and at worst, claiming that you're actively taking someone for granted when you thought you were expressing your friendship for them a lot more clearly than it seems like you did. It is very upsetting to hear people spin things that are not at all how you remember them. And it is perfectly natural to get defensive, especially when you hear something that you don't think has any merit. That you think, no, actually that's not what fucking happened. And sure enough, Scanlan gives up some ground to those arguments. He admits that a few of these things he said today are not true. They're right about that. But ultimately, once it's over, no matter how it ends, he's still going to leave. Weirdly, I think that makes this one of the most realistic arguments I've ever seen in fiction. This is not a debate where both sides are coming at it from the same perspective of simply trying to convince the other of some very obvious facts. This is not a discussion about what Scanlan should do, and he's weighing the different options and trying to make a pro-con list and figure out where he should go with his life and all that stuff. It's a fight. And in most fights, you find whatever argument can help justify the conclusion you already landed on. Keyleth asks if they're still friends, and Percy answers it's worse than that. We're family. And then he unloads on Scanlan. Percy's not been talking that much throughout all of this, but he's still really mad. He's probably angrier than Vax is, because Vax thought he had a best friend who, it turned out, never felt fully respected by him. But Percy spent the last episode wondering why Scanlan, the shitty little gargoyle, gets to come back to life, but his family didn't. So his reaction is very different. He says Scanlan's a shitty person, and so was his daughter, and all the things that Scanlan doesn't like about himself are the exact things that saved his life. He says the party cares about him because despite his shittiness, because every once in a while, he comes through in a way other people can't, which again is an argument about what Scanlan does for the party and the value he provides in a very utilitarian, tactical way. Even if he's not literally talking about battle tactics or spells, it is still an argument that Scanlan has value because of what he does for the party. But he also makes a valuable point, one that is similar to the argument Vex was trying to make, which is that Scanlan should just get to know his daughter, let her discover that Scanlan is a shitty person, and let her discover that he's also still likable. The party still likes Scanlan despite the fact that he's a shit. He also points out that it was bullshit to ever promise that he would not die. That is a promise he could never keep. It was a juvenile idea to pretend that he could. And yes, it's worth pointing out that this promise originated with Matt role-playing Kaylee. She's the one who made Scanlan promise not to die. But Scanlan is the one who held on to that like it was some divine mantra. He's the one who interpreted this promise as not just meaning that he should survive all this and come back home, but that even a brief death would be considered a failure. And in fairness to Scanlan, you really shouldn't count on being able to come back to life given what Matt's resurrection rules are, but it was still a very juvenile idea that he would be able to promise something like that. As Percy points out, nobody can keep a promise that they will not die. But of course, that's not the only thing that Percy is angry about. He also can't stand the hypocrisy.
And when you're done with that, and we will leave you with that fucking shit girl, I would like you to look up my parents' name. You can find it on every fifth hallway in this fucking city. And I'm out.
So now that we've seen how the entire cast has reacted, I actually think a really interesting pattern has developed. What are the 5 stages of grief? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. In the scene, Grog is absolutely exhibiting acceptance. He understands that it is ultimately Scanlan's choice whether he wants to leave or not. But he also understands that they made a mistake, and all they can do is apologize to him for it and let him have his space and his time. I would argue that Keyleth is depression. She's sulking a little bit about the idea that they were selfish, they did the wrong thing by not asking him how he was feeling earlier on, they might not actually be friends at all. That's depression. She says a lot of the same things that Grog says, but she's not come to terms with them in the same way that he has. This situation is weighing much more heavily on her, and she views it as a failure on their part. I would argue that Vax is bargaining. He's the one who keeps saying things like, sure, you can leave, that's wonderful, go ahead and leave if that's what's going to make you happy, but don't do so with a lie on your tongue and self-pity in your heart. Sure, you can be upset, but don't tell us that we didn't care about you, that we didn't ask questions. That part's not true. It's bargaining. Percy is obviously anger, as we just saw, and Vex is also anger. She's mostly just sitting here silently feeling upset and hurt, but occasionally calling him out on his bullshit and doing so very aggressively. We don't really have anybody here who represents denial. I mean, I guess Pike is denial because she's literally not saying anything, but that feels like I'm looking for someone to fill the role of denial, and I don't need to do that. This is not a Disney movie where these color-coded characters represent the different aspects of the 5 stages of grief. This is not Avengers Endgame. But I do think these reactions really run the gamut. I think all the members of the party make really valid points, and most of them also say at least one thing that I think, best case scenario, undercuts their arguments. It's really funny, as this video was getting closer, as people knew I was going to make it, I saw people wondering which side I was going to take, and some discussion in the comments about who people thought was more at fault, Scanlan or Vox Machina. And I'll admit, that kind of surprised me. I didn't know there were people out there who thought that any side of this argument made a perfect argument and was not without fault. Yes, I'll grant you I shouldn't have been surprised that people had strong opinions on the internet and didn't agree with each other, but this is not Scanlan versus Vox Machina united as a whole, as a united front, because Vox Machina as a team is not united in their response. Scanlan's argument comes from an emotional place, and as a result, sometimes his logic falls apart. The responses of some of the members of Vox Machina are coming from a logical place. They're pointing out the holes in Scanlan's arguments, but they're often failing to meet him on an emotional level, because some of them are saying the absolute wrong things. They're so hung up on the idea that there's evidence that debunks his claims, but they're not recognizing the fact that they keep talking about how much he means to them. They're not really addressing the fundamental critique, which is that they haven't expressed it in a way that he could hear it. Ultimately, Scanlan is depressed, and you can always beat yourself up about what you could have done or should have done, or how to make it clear to them that they matter to you, or you can lay blame. You can say that he shouldn't have waited to talk to them about this. You can say that everyone else in the party doesn't understand what he's going through and they're not trying enough to understand him, that there's nothing they could say to make him understand them, but ultimately, I think the only person in this room who gets it is Grog. He's the only person who has what I would consider to be the correct response, and certainly the most mature response, far more so than I have. Yes, Scanlan is hurting. Scanlan's coming from an emotional place, and he is saying things that are not true. He's saying them because he's hurt, and he's saying them because he wants to hurt the party. And Grog is basically the only person who meets him in that emotional place and validates his feelings. Keyleth is trying, but she and Vax are stuck on the wrong part, the idea that he feels unappreciated. Vex is furious at Scanlan for using Kaylee as an excuse rather than treating her as a person, something that matters a lot to her as someone with a very shitty dad who they thought Scanlan was going to repeat some of those same cycles of abuse. Vax and Percy are furious at the hypocrisy of Scanlan being upset that they didn't know about his mother when their argument is that he doesn't know anything about theirs either. Grog is the only one who says, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that." Look, sometimes when you're in an argument, it feels impossible to be the Grog. I am so much more often the Vax, and in those moments, all I'm trying to do is not be the Scanlan or the Percy. But man, I can tell you from experience, my life would be so much easier if I could let myself be the Grog more often. And just say, "I'm sorry I hurt you. I wasn't thinking about things from your perspective, and that was wrong." At this point, as Percy leaves, Matt speaks for the first time in 20 minutes. As Percy leaves the room, Matt describes how he runs into Kaylee, who we discover has been standing outside and hearing all of this. This is funny because this is the first time Matt has spoken in about 20 minutes, and he's audibly hoarse because he hasn't had to speak in almost half an hour. Percy tries to go in for a hug with Kaylee, which is crazy. I think Percy thinks of himself as someone who can just speak the truth to his friends, even if it hurts, and then he can just remind them of their family and it'll all be fine. But he absolutely does not have that kind of dynamic with Kaylee, and it's crazy that he thought he did. Percy leaves, and Kaylee comes in, picks up her bag, and asks if Scanlan's coming. And he says, yeah. She tells him to grab his things. She'll wait for him downstairs. That's another great move from Matt to make sure that Scanlan has a chance to say goodbye to his friends, and with the promise that now they're not going to be overheard by Kaylee. Scanlan says that he just has to go be a short halt for a while and figure out what that means. He tells them to buy some tents because they won't have a mansion anymore, but then he seems to think better of that jab because he says he'll know they'll all be fine because they have each other. And then after that, he drops something else. The mic. Let's roll the clip.
I love you all. I even love Percy. And his parents, Frederick and Johanna.
This is when we find out that Scanlan did actually know Percy's parents' names. It wasn't hypocrisy to demand the same from his fellow party members, and since Percy's final retort was that accusation of hypocrisy, we actually see that Taliesin is genuinely impressed that Sam had that answer ready. Although, as will come out later in the episode, out of character, Sam didn't know these names until he looked them up before this fight. He got them from the Critical Role wiki. He got the names from there because he probably expected someone to pull a similar move and accuse him of not knowing their parents' names either. He hasn't memorized Percy's parents' names. He looked them up as ammunition in case he needed them. But in fairness to Scanlan, there's still a reason why Percy's parents' names were on the wikis, and Scanlan's weren't, because nobody ever thought to ask his mother's name. Grog gives him his salt lick rock, something he can lick whenever he misses them. Vex gives him the gate stone so he can come back to them whenever he's ready. And at first, Scanlan turns it down because Sam knows the party is going to need this long before Scanlan might ever use it to return to the party. His plan is to leave the group forever. He does not need the gate stone. But when she insists, he says, "When Vex gives you something, you take it." Truer words have never been spoken.
All right. Don't die.
Scanlan. We'll miss you.
First of all, not the point of this moment, not why I wanted to play that clip, but it is kind of insane that Scanlan leaves the scene asking them to make the same promise he broke to Kaylee. Don't die. But I personally love Vax's final words to him, with the emphasis that makes it clear that they won't miss his magic, they won't miss his songs, or his jokes, or his poop. They'll miss the man. Scanlan might not feel appreciated for anything other than his magic, or his music, or his jokes, or hopefully not his poop, but who knows. I don't think that feeling was helped by Percy's argument, but Vax is trying to tell him that they're going to miss far more than just his magic, or his jokes, or his songs, or his poop. They're going to miss Scanlan himself. Scanlan responds by saying that Vax told him he was right in that note in Thordak's lair, but they should revisit that conversation again someday. It's kind of an admission that maybe Scanlan no longer believes the things he said that helped get Vax out of this depression. And the next time they talk, their roles might be reversed, and maybe Vax will be able to shed some light on how he was able to pull himself out of the darkness, because that might be something Scanlan needs to hear. At least that's how I've always read that moment. One of my favorite moments in this episode. And that's my interpretation of it. And then Scanlan packs up his things, and he leaves. The party sits in stunned silence, not really sure how to process this. They offer a few words of comfort for each other. Grog once again says that what's important is that he's alive. He needs time, and they can give him that. But I think Vex sums up this whole thing pretty well. She says, fuck him for not saying something sooner, and fuck us for not asking. I don't think anything sums it up quite as well as that. No one in this room is blameless, and neither is the man who just left. I don't want to be flippant. Obviously, he's depressed. That's a very real problem. It can feel impossible for someone going through that to recognize a helping hand when it's offered to them. But he was also deliberately cruel in this scene, and his own problems don't absolve him of the responsibility of taking accountability for the words he used against them. I'm not trying to be all, well, both sides are bad, actually, but the sad thing is, this is a very realistic fight. And in a lot of real-world fights, everyone says something they shouldn't have, and everyone makes at least one good point. At the end of the scene, I don't come away thinking either side is more right than the other. I'm just sad at how hurt they are, and how they had to hurt each other before it ended. And speaking of which, I should probably talk about this from the perspective of a D&D game, right? This is a really hard scene to pull off unless you and the other players have absolute trust in each other. You have to make sure everyone else at the table knows that everything you're saying is purely being said by your character and not you as a player. There are a couple of different methods that you can use for a scene like this. I talked about some of them in the past. One of them, the one that I think has had the most success in my own games, is a sort of out-of-character prelude. When I was a player in a Curse of Strahd campaign, one of my fellow players would always preface any dramatic scene by saying, as a player, I'm perfectly fine with what's going on, but my character is upset about, and then they would give us a little taste of their character's thought process. They were essentially asking if it was okay with all of us if we launched into an argument in character. Once we all gave them the green lights, we could just dive into a scene where there were real, genuine arguments being had at the table, but they were only being had by our characters. Speaking of green lights, if you don't like the idea of just stating out loud what you want the scene to be in advance, if you want the scene to develop more organically than that, you know, fair enough, there are lots of points in the scene we just saw that were only really possible because the players were having a much more realistic fight, where they weren't always understanding what was happening in Scanlan's head and it was playing out more organically. But you might still want to make sure the other players know that this emotional outburst is purely character motivated and that this is a role-playing scene. Well, one way to make sure everyone is cool with what's happening is to use traffic light cards. You can say the words out loud, "How dare you, you absolute piece of shit!" But you can also hold up a traffic light card with a green light on it so everyone else knows what you mean is, don't worry, we're good, this is just my character speaking, let's play in the space, I love some juicy, juicy drama. And also, another option is just to tell the other players, hey, I'm retiring this character, I want to play someone new, this is my character finding a way to excuse himself from the party, so you can all meet my next guy. I actually had to do that with my first D&D character. I wanted to play a new character because I was tired of my swashbuckler getting knocked unconscious in every single fight, so I decided to play a ranger. This is back in 3.5 when playing a ranger was not as ill-advised as it is in 5th edition. But my character told the other characters, hey, I'm not going to come on this next quest with you guys. And everyone else in the party started trying to convince me, trying to persuade me to go on the next mission. And eventually my DM jumped in and said, no, guys, Mike isn't leaving the group, and he's also not saying we should do something else. He's going to play a different character. This is just Calvin DeGray leaving the group. He's saying goodbye. You're going to meet his next character soon. We're still going to keep playing D&D with Mike. We didn't know it at the time, but we were basically employing another safety tool, and one that I use all the time. Pause for a minute. It's exactly what it sounds like. You just ask everyone to pause, and you clarify something to make sure everyone is on the same page. Now, after my DM clarified that I wasn't leaving the campaign, my character was leaving the group, so I could go play somebody else. Well, after that, all the arguments and debates ended, and they just wished me well and sent me on my way. So the obvious downside of that method is that if you want a scene like this one, if you want this big dramatic moment where all the players take it really seriously, then just telling them what you're doing is going to reframe the way they approach that scene. But first of all, our conversation was nothing like a Bard's Lament. We were literally just talking in circles, going back and forth. No one was changing anybody's mind, and nothing interesting was happening. But I also argue that it is often a lot more valuable to reduce confusion at the table, because that way, you're inviting the other players to participate in the scene on the same terms as you. Scanlan leaving the party this way is like a huge grenade that gets dropped into the campaign. It's going to have some lasting consequences for a good long time. But this is a very durable group. They've been through a lot. They're also literally getting paid to be here. And most importantly, they're also all messy bitches who live for drama. And not all those things might be true about your own game. You might not be able to trust that your fellow players will react the same way when you try to pull a move like this at your table, which is why there can be a lot of value in just explaining to them, my character is leaving the party, because he's really upset with the rest of the group. I love you guys, I'm going to keep playing with you, but my character is in a really bad place emotionally, and I want to roleplay his departure where he's going to express some real frustration with you all. The downside is that you have to expect your fellow players to play along, when some of them might be thinking, okay, if I can't convince you, then why would I bother arguing with you? That's a waste of everyone's energy. And some of you will get that reaction from some of your fellow players, and I need you to hear me, that's okay. You extended an invitation and they declined it, and they need to be allowed to do that. But the upside of this method is that if you're making it clear to your fellow players that you trust them enough to play along, you're inviting them to participate in a dramatic scene, and they were able to do so on the same terms as you. You'll be on equal footing because they understand what the scene is about, and they understand the ultimate goal of the scene. This can work really well if you've played a game like Fiasco, where that is basically how each scene is designed. You go into it with a much clearer understanding of what everybody's goals are, because at the end of the day, in that game, you have the same goal, to tell a compelling story and not be too precious with your characters. In a scenario like this one, if they take you up on your invitation and roleplay your dramatic departure, then when the scene is over, they're going to have a subplot on their own that they can carry through to future games, something they can think about and interact with as you bring in your new character, and they start judging that character more harshly, and you want them to because that's interesting and dramatic. If all goes well, you're giving them a lot of rich emotional material to deal with in future sessions and future scenes with you as your other characters. But if you're clear about what you want the scene to be in advance, then you're doing so with their permission. You're inviting them into a scene like that rather than just dropping it on top of them without warning. These approaches of sharing your character's mental thoughts in advance, or pausing the scene partway through to clarify something, or using traffic lights to make it clear where your character's feelings end and your feelings begin, these are basically the three methods I would suggest you use if you want to have a big dramatic scene like this one, especially one where you might think your character might leave when it's all over. As much as I love this scene, I definitely don't recommend that you just dive in cold the way Sam did, throwing his players this vicious right hook that they were not expecting and following it up with a series of body blows that they were not prepared for. It worked for their group, but it also did cause a lot of bleed. That's the term we use in this hobby when real-world emotions are actually affected by the things that happen at the table. You still want some sort of response to what's happening. The purpose of art is to make people feel things. D&D games are the same way. You want them to have some sort of genuine emotional reaction to what you're doing, but you don't want the other players to get genuinely hurt or upset by the things your character said to their characters. That's what the safety tools are meant to help prevent. They're here to stop any bleed that could cause harm or disrupt the experience at the table. Obviously, I'm going to get some comments that say things like, well, if Sam had explained that he was replacing his character, that would have undercut this incredible scene. Therefore, this is a bad suggestion and you shouldn't do that. Listen. Unless you are playing with the cast of Critical Role, and you have been for years, you cannot trust that trying to replicate exactly what happened at their table will go as well for you as it did for them. If you want the big dramatic moments, but you don't want to run the risk of actually upsetting your fellow players, which I assume you do not want, because I assume you are not an asshole, and you want to make sure everyone has the proper buy-in so they can have an argument in character without any bleed, that's the purpose of safety tools. We don't really see any of Critical Role's safety tools on screen because they are a dramatic show. They're making TV. They don't want to break the flow of the story, so they take other methods that don't appear at the table, like having an after show where they just talk about the game and how they felt about it, and presumably others as well. They talk during the break, etc. They don't want to show their safety tools on screen because they don't want to break the immersion of their audience. You probably don't have that same concern at your table, and I would also argue you shouldn't have that concern at your table. Hell, even if you are running an actual play show, like Critical Role, your players need to understand that there are better ways to make sure everybody is comfortable before a scene like this, so you can actually invite them to play in the space, free of the feeling that any of this is real, without the lingering feeling that this fight is based off of real resentment the players have for one another. I know it sounds like I'm criticizing the way these players handled this situation, and I think it worked fine for them at their table, and obviously it was good TV for us. But that doesn't mean that we can just deploy the same practices at our table without any consideration for how to adapt it for a group that does not have the same dynamic as the cast of this show. I feel like Michael Caine in The Prestige.
He doesn't use it.
Safety tool.
Robert, I don't know how Borden does the trick. So you either wait for him to retire and buy the secret, or you listen to how I would do it. And the only way that I know how to do it is to find you a bloody good
safety tool. I know some people always get so upset when I imply that the way the cast of Critical Role plays D&D is not always the ideal way to replicate those same scenes and emotions at our own tables, because it sounds like what I'm saying is that Critical Role is doing it bad. They're doing a bad job. It's not. That's not what I'm saying. For them, it's working. For us, it's great TV. Clearly, they're handling safety tools in their own ways, some of which work in our games and some of which probably would not. But if you are someone who wants to run a scene like this at your table, I really do not recommend just taking the approach that Sam did and escalating it into a full-on argument without giving your other players at least some hint that what's happening is completely character motivated and that you're essentially inviting them to participate in a fun role-playing scene and not trying to blindside them with these personal attacks. The goal is to prevent anything from bleeding through, and sometimes that means taking preventative measures. It's a little different than what you see on TV. Critical Role is kind of like, well, it's kind of like a lot of things you might see on your TV or your laptop or your phone. I'm not using that argument the way most people do, to argue that Critical Role is fake or it's scripted or that they're overacting or that's not real D&D. My point is, just because you don't see all the proper precautions being taken in the entertainment you like to watch, doesn't mean you should also avoid those precautions when you try this at home. Sure, Critical Role had this incredible dramatic scene. Your scene might not go as well if you don't use tools like the traffic light cards or a preface to explain your mindset going into the scene, or even just pausing the scene if you need to make sure everyone is on the same page. I know that it looks fun and cool to do it without the proper safety tools, but I really don't recommend you do unless you are fully prepared to deal with the consequences. And speaking of taking a moment to pause for a minute, I'm actually going to do that myself. I don't want to end the episode here. I saw a lot of people suggesting that I should do this as a 2-part video, and this would feel like the most logical point to take a break, but if I did that, we'd basically be ending this video with the really sad moment of Scanlan leaving and everyone else being upset. We would end it on this really heavy down note. I want to finish the entire episode because I think it's valuable to discuss how this all works together as one session. I don't want to end on the note of Scanlan leaving on such bitter terms. I don't want to end the episode here for the same reason they changed the ending for the TV show. It's a really bummer way to end things. But the script is long. I've been recording for like an hour and a half. I need to take a break. So, just like Scanlan, I'm going to spend the rest of the day being a father, and I'll pick up here in a minute.
Teacher, teacher, what do you see? I see children looking at me. Children, children, what do you see? We see a brown bear, a red bird, a yellow duck, a blue horse, a green frog, a purple cat, a white dog, a black sheep, a goldfish, and a teacher looking at us. That's what we see. Good night, baby.
Okay, it's a new day. I spent some time with my loved ones. I rested my voice a little bit. Let's finish up this video. So from the perspective of a D&D campaign, a player character just left, and the rest of the party's left trying to figure out what happens next. Keyleth says something that breaks my heart. She pointed out that Percy said they're worse than friends, they're family. And then she adds, and family leaves. Of course, that's how she would respond. Her mother left. Grog leaves the room and goes to look for Percy, who didn't go far, he was just down the hall. Grog asks if they have anybody they can send to follow Kaylee and Scanlan, just to make sure they don't get into too much trouble. Percy says the gnomes probably wouldn't like that, but Grog isn't sure he cares. As much as he was the most understanding member of the party during that scene, he's still hurt. Percy responds by just telling Grog about the brothel, the one that he lied to him about earlier. Right now, he just doesn't seem to see the point in his little prank. Might as well let Grog have what he wants. So Grog decides to go there and blow off a little steam. As he leaves, Percy wants to make sure Grog knows that they're family, and says that it's nice having an older brother again. Leave it to Taliesin to break my heart with a moment of kindness like that. Matt starts playing Pike again. She's clearly upset and emotional, like all of them, but she says, okay, Scanlan needs to do this, right? So what do we need to do? What tasks are in front of us? She says she just wants to be anywhere but here. And again, fantastic move from Matt. He's trying to solve the same problem he has every time the players decide to take a Downtime episode. How can you get the players out of a Downtime spiral and into the next adventure? That's harder than ever to do after a scene like this, which is basically guaranteed to crash their momentum. They list off the things on their to-do list: visit the Water Ashari and complete Keyleth's Aramente, go to Hell to kill a demon, and Keyleth says this seems like maybe they might have to break up and go on their individual tasks and go do another few months of downtime. Matt, as Pike, says, well, just because Scanlan's on his own doesn't mean we all have to go out on our own. We can still do things together. And Vax isn't quite saying we have to break up and do individual quests, but he is still saying that they need some downtime in general. They need a break. They need a little bit of retirement. He's kind of in line with Keyleth here. Both Marisha and Liam seem to think that Matt is steering them towards another downtime break, like they took when they transitioned from Pathfinder to D&D, where the characters split up and went on their own and came back a few months later. At least that's how I've always read this scene. It has always seemed to me like these two players assumed that this was Matt trying to set up the next time jump. Vax also just starts confessing everything he's got going on in his head because he feels like the lesson of Scanlan is not to keep things bottled up inside. In fairness, I think Liam is the absolute last player who needs to worry about that. His character has been pretty consistently wearing his heart on his sleeve for the entire campaign. But it's a nice sentiment, and it's a very honest, emotional response from his character. He tells Pike he's always looked up to her, he tells Keyleth that Vex is his best friend, he tells Vex that he's in love with Keyleth, and these are all things that everybody knows, but he's just paranoid now. He's paranoid that there's some secret somebody's keeping that's going to cause another blow up in the group. He's petrified about what he owes to a goddess of death. There's another secret everybody knows already. Any other secrets people need to share? Here's one. Vex is in love with Percy. We all know that. Anything else? His takeaway from that scene was that the secret Scanlan held in festered until it hit a boiling point. I'm mixing my metaphors, but you know what I'm saying. However, Vex says that the takeaway is actually that they all talk too much, and she leaves. Keyleth says she thinks the takeaway is that they've all forgotten who they were when they were apart, and then she leaves the room. I'm not really sure how we got that takeaway, except for the fact that I think she thinks that Matt is steering them towards solo downtime. I don't know that for sure, it's just my guess, but I don't really see another way to get to that conclusion unless that's what's going on in her head. She mentions everyone going off on their own like 3 different times. Pike and Vax go to get a drink, Keyleth and Vex go get a drink, Grog cries in the company of courtesans. They just spend the night processing their emotions, ruminating on the absence of Scanlan. At this point, Liam thinks they're wrapping up the game, so he gets up to give Sam a hug. And Matt says, no, we're not wrapping up the game, you guys have things to do. Basically saying, I'm not ending the game unless we go on an adventure of some kind, so no, we're not wrapping things up right now. Now, Matt has an ulterior motive for this, which we'll talk about very soon, but even if he didn't, I think it's a good move to keep the session moving past this point, because you do not want the session to end with everyone drinking on their own because one of the party members left. You want to try to get the players ending on a higher note than this. Otherwise, this could really kill the momentum of your campaign overall. So they meet up in the morning, hungover, and this is the downside of a downtime scene like this, because the players wanted their characters to have a chance to process their feelings. They all went drinking or whoring or whatever it was. But all that only took 30 seconds at the table. Once they're back together, they don't really feel like they've achieved any sense of catharsis, because no time has passed for them. In fairness, for the characters themselves, catharsis would be pretty difficult to find in a moment like this anyway, but they haven't had a chance to actually process any of this. But at the very least, they decide that they are ready to focus on what they need to do next. Once again, the to-do list includes the water druids, the demon in hell, and delivering the hand. They didn't list that earlier, but that is going to be the fastest mission. That's more or less all they're emotionally prepared for right now anyway. So that's what they decide they're going to go do. But first, they decide to take a look at the research they got from the cave where they fought Raishan, the ancient green dragon. Gilmore takes a look at this evil book they got, and he confirms with his Identify spell that it is an extremely evil book. You would learn a lot from it, but it would cost a great deal. It would exact a heavy toll on your spirit. They decide to just put that away for now. Let's go drop off the hand, and then maybe we can visit the druids on the way back, since the Water Ashari are more or less in the same corner of the world. They're kind of on the way back if we go by boat. They ask Keyleth to scry on Scanlan, and she sees him and Kaylee walking down the road with a faint smile on their lips. He's happy. He's earned his rest. Okay, let's go drop off a hand. On their way to the tree, Vex takes Grog aside and asks how he's doing. He says he's glad Scanlan's alive. Obviously, that's what keeps this from being tragic. But it's hard for Grog to lose one of the people he was closest to. After all, he only has a few people in the group that he truly knows on such a deep level. Scanlan, Pike, and Vex, who of course is on that list because he saw her tits that one time. Grog is a very simple man, and Travis is, once again, a national treasure. They needed a moment of levity like that right now. They travel through the tree and arrive in Ank'Harel to head to the Death's Respite, the bar where Mr. Sasharu's employers make their lair. Percy points out to Matt that he is not wearing Mr. Sasharu's cloak in public because they're here to prove that they avenged her, and that would send the wrong message. That's a really good point. It's something that Matt didn't even seem to have thought of, but it was very smart of Taliesin to point that out. And he also tells the audience watching that he has informed Cassandra where he's going and what they're doing. They just skipped it for expediency, but he would have done that before they left the castle. They arrive at the tavern and they see like an 8-foot-tall golden golem holding a leather book and a quill. And in front of him is a handsome human man with shoulder-length blonde hair and a well-trimmed goatee, wearing polished armor and holding a helmet embedded with diamonds and rubies and other gems. And all of him looks pretty much spotless and undamaged in any way from battle or warfare.
Immediately catches their attention.
You there! You lot! Hello! Wow! Who are you all? Look at this, magical items from head to toe. Why, I've never seen anything quite like it.
Pouring it on a little thick, friend. What's up?
Doty, come here, will you? Take this down.
And he watches the giant construct, takes a few steps forward, and begins writing into the book.
In my travels through...
Kleenex. It doesn't work. You piece of shit.
God damn it!
I couldn't have been more candy.
Fuck. I didn't want to throw something hard at him.
Holy
fucking hell!
shit.
Dodi, take this down. In my travels through Oncarel, I have never seen so many magical items in one place. But then I saw them walking up to me, and I knew I had met some very special people. That's it for now.
I'm being narrated.
Hello!
I just get very nervous.
Nice to meet you all. The name is Taryon Darrington.
Taryon Darrington?
Taryon Darrington. My friends just call me Terry. And I'm a bit of an adventurer.
He offers to hire the players to accompany him on adventures, and Vex tries to get rid of him by telling him that hiring them is 50,000 gold, and Terry just casually says, well, that's nothing. He's extremely wealthy. Grog pivots and says that it's an hourly fee, and Terry's not going to go for that, but don't worry, they'll also get a commission of whatever spoils they find, because he's looking to hire some companions to join him on his adventures. This is why Matt was so keen to get the players to their next adventure. Wherever they went, they were going to encounter Terry on the way there. And of course, this is why Scanlan's mind could not be changed, and he was definitely going to leave the group. He was planning on bringing on a new character. Although we later found out on Talks Machina that Sam thought that Terry was going to be introduced the following week and not in this session, but Matt misunderstood Sam's request. Thankfully, Matt gave Sam a heads up that this session would end with Terry's introduction, so Sam had at least a little bit of time to try to figure out how he was going to play him. But this short notice is also definitely why Sam wasn't ready with a title for Taryon's memoir.
Yes, I haven't settled on a title yet. It will either be Terry's Adventures. It's sort of lame. Or it could be Daring Adventures of Darrington, or it could be Terry On with Taryon, or something like that. I'm working on the title. I have a while to finish it.
The Daring Trials and Tribulations of Terry Darrington.
That's fantastic. Dodi, please write that down.
We'll hear some more titles presented in the next session, once Sam actually has a little bit more of a chance to prep the character. He's also an artificer, which was still being playtested at the time, so it's possible some of these rules don't line up with the version that later appeared in D&D source books. But they also made some changes that were specific to this character. For example, Dodi is Taryon's Steel Defender, but that's meant to be a much more tactical feature, and while we will later discover that Dodi can definitely fight, Sam and Matt chose to reduce some of Dodi's fighting abilities in order to justify raising his intelligence so he could serve as Terry's biographer. But Terry also has a list of adventuring accomplishments he wants to achieve, which also isn't completely ready. We'll hear the full list in the next episode, but at least in this episode, he's able to use the concept of having a to-do list as a justification to join the party on their next adventure.
Buddy boy, we have to go to the 9 Hells in the not-too-distant future. Are you down for that?
Well, hold on, let me check my list. That is on the list. It was lower down, but it's another thing I have to tick off before I'm a real adventurer. So I'm up for anything if you are.
Wow.
I do not like you.
This fucking asshole. Am I right? This fucking asshole.
And of course, Sam created a character who is immediately very unlikable. He's not going to make this easy for the party to replace Scanlan. He's effectively given his fellow players a challenge. You have to find some way to make it make sense that you're going to go on an adventure with this guy. And the response from the other players is utter fucking chaos. They go ballistic. But eventually Matt is able to rein them back in and get them back into character. But that doesn't mean that the rest of this interaction goes smoothly.
I can grant powers to many people. For instance, you, little elf girl, what's your name?
I'm gonna move over.
Oh, hell no.
What kind of adventurer are you? If you've never heard of Vox fucking Machina.
Oh, is that a band of evildoers? Is that a roving Goliath horde?
Where the fuck have you been? Who are you? No, really, who the fuck are you?
My name is Taryon Darrington. I am an adventurer.
Again, this entire scene is gold. The time codes are on screen. I'll summarize the highlights, but you really should watch this entire segment. It's fantastic. Terry describes how he's slain monsters like a smallish beholder because his team of adventurers roughed it up for him and he was able to come in for the kill. He also mentions that one of the monsters he wants to fight is a Naga, a perfect choice because that was the first monster Scanlan killed. And he also wants to fight a dragon someday, another very purposeful choice because Vox Machina just fought a bunch of them. If they were actually going to go back and do all these things, it would be extremely redundant. It'd be retreading old ground from their previous adventures. And it also places Terry in the shadow of Scanlan because he wants to accomplish all these incredible things that Scanlan already did. And it also makes it clear that he does not have the distinguished legacy of Vox Machina. Trust me, if he did, they would have heard about it by now, because he would have told them. But he also does have some genuinely cool items, like a rod that turns into different weapons, like a sword or a sword on fire. And apparently it cost about 70,000 gold to commission its creation. And now we have 2 party members who are more or less okay with Terry joining the group. Grog thinks that the weapon is cool and thinks Terry is an interesting, fun distraction, mostly because he's interested in fucking with him a little bit. And Vex wants some money. They can apparently get 50,000 gold from Terry just by having him hire them to guide him to their mission, which is to just drop off a hand at a bar. That's almost enough money right there to commission a transforming weapon of their own, like he has. Keyleth and Vax don't like Terry. Well, okay, nobody in the group likes Terry. Keyleth refers to him as the worst version of Percy, just the rich boy who buys all his stuff and is not actually somebody who earned anything he got. But, reluctantly, they do agree to let him come along on their journey.
Okay, but
Come on, pretty boy. Let's go.
You about this.
Doty, take this down. As the group turned around, I knew I had them. And our adventure was about to begin. End chapter.
Oh my god.
I hate him so much.
I hate him so much.
I love him. I miss Scanlan.
Matt is about to wrap up the game, but Vex wants the money up front. Terry doesn't have that much cash on him. Vex tries to get Doty to tell her how much money Terry is carrying, but A, Doty does not talk, and B, Doty only listens to Terry. Terry says that if Vex had some sort of a pet or a companion, she would understand. So we have a character who has already been designed to troll Vex, to be the unflattering counterpoint for Percy, and to remind the players of how much better Scanlan was. And we've barely scratched the surface. This is a brilliant replacement character because he's going to immediately create a lot of really interesting dynamics with the other player characters. And now, even if he does something that seems similar to Scanlan, it doesn't feel like the player doesn't have the range to create distinct characters the way it might when, I don't know, hypothetically, all of my D&D characters all wind up flattening into basically the same guy. Here, if Terry ever feels too much like Scanlan, that feels like deliberate trolling. And even when he's not, he has such a different, more adversarial relationship with the party, then now any interaction he's going to have is immediately going to lead to some very interesting role-playing.
All right, sure, you can use it too. When you need it, if you just hold that coin up, you'll turn invisible.
That's seriously an invisible making coin?
No, Grog, no, do not show satisfaction in the things he says.
This is just my gut reaction now.
Even if you're impressed, we pretend like we're not. Pretend like you're not impressed.
I'm not saying I can't be bought, but that's definitely...
Hey, big man.
Yeah.
Look at this. Heavy crossbow.
It's the most amazing thing. I mean, really. Hold on.
Huh?
Not impressed.
You can shoot it.
I want to shoot it.
When the other player characters tell Grog, don't be nice to Terry, Terry intervenes with something that Grog would love. And I love that Grog immediately folds and loves Terry. Their dynamic will develop in the next episode. Grog will not be ride or die for Terry for long, but right now, when the players are trying to find some justification for how they can explain hanging out with somebody like Taryon, and they're very reluctant to do so, Grog is all in. Travis Willingham, best D&D player in the world, and it's not even close. And as they head into the tavern, Taryon announces that working together is going to be fun, fun, fun. That's the end of the episode, and the crew riots and shoots Sam with Nerf balls. Though in fairness, that's not the last time somebody on the Critical Role set will shoot Sam with a Nerf bullet.
Ready. And find clues. In my cancer.
What is wrong with you?
And that does it for this episode. One of our major characters has left the show and been replaced by somebody else. Someone who has a lot of things on his to-do list that he wants to do. And the party also has a lot of things they need to get done, things they've been putting off for a long time when they were focused on this larger objective of dealing with the Chroma Conclave and collecting the vestiges. And that's essentially what this next story arc is going to be all about. Tackling loose ends. They have to return the hand, that won't take very long, but then they have to go to Hell, and they have to complete Keyleth's Aramente. And they have to do all of that before they can finally have the downtime that Vax so desperately craves, so they can enjoy just a little bit of normalcy before they get to their next big story arc. And on a related note, that's more or less what I'm going to start doing on this channel. Not the downtime, but the catching up with loose ends. Because last year, I put a lot of energy into really only making the biggest videos I could, and they kind of dominated my life. There were other things going on too, it's never just one thing, but my output really slowed down, partially because the scale of my videos got so big and I was trying to make as many Demystified videos as possible. But it turns out there is a ceiling on how many Demystified videos I can make, and trying to make them faster just wasn't possible. So even though it may not seem like it from the scale of this video, this year, I'm going to try to make some shorter videos. I'm going to put a lot more focus on going back to a lot of my other video series that I've essentially left dormant for this past year. So rather than trying to make a new Demystified video every week or every 2 weeks, I think I'm going to focus on just making sure that one comes out every month. That's kind of the numbers I was pulling last year, but this time I won't be beating myself up about that. Now that might change. There might be some times where I still get 2 videos in a month, and I still do have some bonus Demystified videos I was commissioned to make by patrons. Those will also get done this year, and they're not going to count against the 1 Demystified per month approach. But the core Demystified videos have just gotten so much more elaborate over the past few years. I've got so many more lessons that I'm talking about in every single episode. I just, for now, have to set aside the idea that I can make that series weekly anytime soon, because I can't manage it bi-weekly. And I think everyone has been very understanding about that, but I haven't been. I've been very harsh with myself about that, as you probably saw if you watched my videos from last year. But I haven't been factoring in the fact that these videos have basically doubled in length compared to what they used to be. Honestly, they've quadrupled in length from the first one. My second Demystified video was 5 minutes long. There was a time where I used to wonder if I would have enough to talk about in any given episode that I thought about combining some episodes together to justify the length of the videos. Those days are long behind us. Again, we should not expect they'll all be as long as this one. This is very much the exception. But since they do usually run somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour, I just have to remember that I'm in a new era of this channel where the Demystified videos just take a lot more time to get done and have a lot more content in them. So I just can't make as many of them as I would have liked to. I know some people are going to be upset that this means that certain videos are going to come much, much later that they're looking forward to, but I promise we're still going to talk about everything. I just want to make sure the videos are as good as possible, and I'm not shortchanging you when I have more I wish I could say. And who knows, maybe at some point down the road, I'll be able to devote more time to the Demystified videos. They may go back to a bi-weekly schedule someday, maybe even weekly at some point. But for this year, the plan is just to get 1 Demystified video out every month. Because with the rest of each month, I have all these other video series that I used to make, and I just haven't made that many installments in all those in a long, long time. So I'm going to make a much more conscious effort to return to a lot of those series. Just like Vox Machina, I'm going to be focused on catching up with everything that's on my to-do list. That means more videos for players, more videos about villains, more videos about dungeon creation, more videos checking out other games, and of course, more videos about story structure. You might have noticed that last year I had this big, ongoing storyline running through my videos, and that was very explicitly tied to the fact that I was also making videos about story structure. But in truth, there's a lot more videos in that series that I just haven't had a chance to make yet because I was so focused on trying to make the videos that most appealed to the algorithm, and as a result, everything else just fell by the wayside. And speaking of the algorithm, if you watched my last video, you know that Odwick the Algorithm Wizard is gone. He served his time on this channel, he was helpful in his ways, I suppose, but it's time to move on from him. And while this year I am going to try to focus on catching up with other things, including other story structure videos, and I'm trying to make a lot more smaller videos and a lot of other installments of my other video series, don't worry, this whole year's worth of videos are not going to revolve around some cartoon character who appears in every single episode. That is not going to happen. What the fuck is this?